Our big interview next is with the brilliant Paul O'Grady, who found fame as the drag queen Lily Savage, went on to become a presenter of the TV game show Blankety Blank in 1997. Since retiring Lily in 2004, he's presented shows including The Paul O'Grady Show, which won a BAFTA in 2005, and For the Love of Dogs. He's also published several books, including Eddie Albert and the Amazing Animal Gang, The Amsterdam Adventure. It's his first children's book, which is now out in paperback. I'm really pleased to say that Paul joins us on Times Radio. Good afternoon.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. It's lovely to hear your voice. Look, you've written bestsellers for adults. Why now a children's book? Tell me about the decision to enter into children's fiction.
Well, I seem to remember there was a phase where everybody started writing children's books. And I sort of had one in the back of my mind, but I held back. I thought, no, I'm not going to write one. And then in lockdown, that's when I decided to sit down and actually, for something to do, to write the book. Because I was making chutney and I was learning the ukulele online and all this business. So I thought, do something constructive. So I actually did. I sat down and I had this little idea germinating in my head, and it had been there for a while, and put it down on paper, or on laptop, I should say.
So it kind of came from you rather than from a publisher saying, hey, Paul, you should definitely get into children's books. It's a dead cert.
Yeah, Kate, I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect it to be published. I sort of did it for my own amusement, to tell you the truth.
Tell me about Eddie Albert then. So let's invite our listeners into the world that you created for him.
Well, Eddie Albert, if you saw Eddie Albert in the street, you just think he was an ordinary little boy. And, he lives with his dad. His dad's a single parent. Eddie's mum's died when he was very little. And he has a gift. He can actually talk to animals and understand them. And he keeps this to himself because he doesn't want to stand out from the crowd. So he's quite introverted because of it. And he's bullied consequently because, the kids at school think he's odd. And then eventually his father has to go on a training course up north. And Eddie goes to stay with his aunt in Amsterdam, who he's never met. And she's his Aunt Budge, Lady Budlier. She married quite well. And together they have this adventure. There's a hideous villainess called Vera Van Loon, who's just a monster. She's a fashionista. She's one of these. She's never away from her iPhone. She's always doing selfies. She's on everything going, you name it. And she's a monster. And she kidnaps a baby orangutan. Because she's lost. It's very strange, all this. I don't know where it came from, Kate. It really, I have no idea where there's a talking hamster. He's got 4 pets, Eddie. He's got a hamster who once belonged to an RAF officer, and he was posted abroad. So she went to live with Eddie. Her name's Bunty, and she's very Margaret Rutherford. Come on, girls. She's very like that. There's a Liverpool crow called Stanley, who's very smart. There's 2 goldfish who would have you believe they were once pirates. And there's a little Chihuahua, Jack Russell Cross, who's based on my dog, called Butch, who watches old-fashioned Mexican cowboy films on telly, on talking pictures, and imitates them. So he talks like what he thinks is a Mexican bandit. I kill you, and all this business. And it all sorts of, I don't know. And Aunt Budge as well. I really like Aunt Budge as auntie because she's an older lady. But the thing is, I was determined to make the older people very active. So she can do everything. She can abseil. And she's got a cook, a Bavarian cook called Miss Schmidt, who used to be a stunt woman. And she's equally active. So sort of for older people, they're good role models.
Yeah.
And Aunt Budge is always saying, don't judge a book by its cover, because of what they do. She goes to the gym and all this business. I don't do any of these things, by the way.
So how much of you is in the book? I mean, when I was reading the prologue, you talk about a boy who has a secret, maybe you've kept something to yourself, maybe you've told a big fat lie, invented wild stories. Yeah. And I just wondered, for your first children's book, you must have delved into the memory bank for recollections of what you did as a child or the stories you loved reading as a kid.
The thing is, everybody said that because I'm good with animals, they said, oh, did you base Eddie, on yourself when you were little? I said, no, he's nothing like me, nothing at all. In fact, none of the characters of the book really have got any of my characteristics. I suppose the villainess might have a few traits when she loses her temper, but that's about it, really. And I was always in trouble at school, always, constantly.
Why?
So I can relate to it because I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, if somebody kicked a football through the window, I'd be the one left standing. So I'd get the blame. I was the one who was always talking in class. I was the one who was always, just a nightmare, really, I suppose, when I was a child.
Interesting.
But not naughty, you know, just mischievous and always getting into trouble. So that I transferred onto Eddie because he's always getting into trouble as well. Through no fault of his own, really.
There's a great joke in the book, and I don't know whether you can remember it. And it's basically the story of why Amsterdam is known as Amsterdam. Of course, your lead character, Eddie, takes his menagerie of pets off to Amsterdam, as you say, to go and stay with Aunt Budge whilst his dad does a training course. And there's a great explainer here, which I was, fully invested in about why Amsterdam is called Amsterdam.
Well, originally, you see, Amsterdam was populated by hamsters, and it was called Hamsterdam. And it wasn't until Cockney hamsters moved in and dropped the H's, it became Amsterdam. So, and he told, because Bunty didn't want to go, you see, the hamster. So, of course, he said that. I think it's Stanley the Crow tells her all this. It's just to get her going. So she goes eventually. And of course, now she's firmly convinced that all hamsters came from Amsterdam.
I loved that. I did. It absolutely tickled
me. It just
me.
Seemed obvious to me, you know, Amsterdam. I couldn't help it. And I thought, I know it's silly, but I'll put it in.
And on the whole kind of celebrity children's author thing, obviously this is something you wanted to do, but there have definitely been murmurs of discontent from very good, popular children's authors, but lesser known, about the fact that your kind of big celebrity turns up and they get all the marketing spend, they get the resources piled into them because they're well-known personalities. Were you sort of wary of that?
I was very wary of that. You know, I didn't want to tread on anybody's toes because there's great writers out there, you know, and that's their living, writing children's books. And I had no idea what mine would be like. And as I said, I really didn't intend it for publication. It was just for my own amusement. I mean, and once I got started, I couldn't stop. Mm-hmm. So it was only when I sent it to my manager and I said, I've written a kid's story, read this, and forgot about it. And next thing he's on the phone saying, oh, they want to publish it. But I do understand, you know, where writers come from, that it's so much easier really to get a commission, you know, if you're well known, than if you're an unknown author. It's very hard. And since I've been writing books, I get lots of people writing to me and sending me copies of their books, you know, that they're self-publishing, and asking for advice. Well, I can't give them any because I really don't know. You know, I just sit there, write it and send it off, and that's it. But on some of the books they send me, they're wonderful. They really are. You know, they're just great.
You're going to get loads more now after saying that, because you've basically admitted that you read a lot to them. So there's going to be a whole other raft of submissions now.
I really love reading, and it's an absolute joy for me to find out how other people's minds tick, you know, and where the story has come from and what's happened maybe in their life that's prompted them to write a story like this.
Yeah.
And some of them are brilliant. They really are brilliant. I've read some great stories, and I do write back, you know, and I always say, look, you're asking the wrong one. Ring Jilly Cooper. She'll tell you what to do. I'm sure Jilly loves me for that.
Thoroughly confusing them. You've got such a fascinating past. I mean, there is so much to go into. But when I was, you know, doing some reading up on you, I know you worked as a care officer for a London council. You left Birkenhead and headed off to London to work in the care sector. Do you often think about those times, you know, particularly because there's been a lot of focus on how unlevel the care sector is, basically, how it's been disproportionately affected by COVID. This week, we've had the news that 30% of care worker jobs in England are still paid below the minimum wage. There's a big issue there, isn't there, with respect for care workers?
There isn't. You're quite right that there's care workers. There isn't a lot of respect for care workers. I think a lot of people think, oh, they just go in, you know, white bums and clean up. which is nonsense. There's far more to it than that, and they deserve a lot of respect, and especially during COVID, what they put themselves through. I really am. I'm a big supporter of care workers, being one myself in the past, because I was what you called a peripatetic care officer. So I'd go in and provide respite care, say, for somebody who had a husband with Alzheimer's and they badly needed a break. So they go off for 2 weeks and I'd go in and live, and look after them. And I had 6 children once for 4 months.
Wow. What?
Yeah,
as in living with them?
Yeah, live it. So you went in as a sort of, and I don't think they'd allow it now. I don't think it'd be allowed. So I'd go in the house as a substitute parent, really, and look after them. And what's more, I'd have to live on what the family lived on. So you'd get the family's allowance, and that was it for the week. So, I had to budget and do all these things, and I'd be taking kids out and spending my own money, taking them to the cinema and the zoo and things like that, because often these children never done that. And the places I went to live in, oh my God, I'd be a week cleaning and washing before I could do anything else. They were pretty rotten, some of them.
So a real eye-opener.
But funny enough, saying that, I really enjoyed it. And I'm still in touch with some of the kids now who are adults.
Wow.
One of them said, "Oh, you were like Mary Poppins. You're always late." I said, "What's that?" I said, "Yeah. You staggered in late. You said, come on, we're going out." And we go to McDonald's and we'll be hauled off somewhere.
What do you think then of the way that the government's handling the cost of living crisis? Because there will be more families thrown into poverty.
I'm gonna really, I think this government, that I can't say what I'd like to say on the radio, what I think about them, because every day there's another disaster. Every day there's another lie, and people are really going to suffer now with the increases, with electricity, with gas, the cost of living, everything. And people aren't going to be able to afford it. And I really do worry. Food banks are on the increase. It shouldn't be happening, really. But they're not handling it well. They really aren't handling it well at all.
Is there a more obvious way to deal with it? I mean, we're talking about trying to fix society's ills here, but from your experience of life, and also having been a carer, having been someone who deals with people, speaks to a lot of people, I'm sure, are we missing something here? Is the government missing something?
Well, what happened when I was working for Camden Council as a peripatetic, we had such resources that we could turn to. There was health visitors, there were home helps, there were Meals on Wheels, occupational therapists. There was all sorts coming in and out the house every day. All that's gone now. All that is gone. And people young carers especially are left on their own to deal with it. And that's not right. A child of 11 should not come home from school and then have to cook for mum or dad or whatever, clean the house. The government really need to step up about carers and about people who work in care homes. And they have to do something about the cost of living. It frustrates me, Ted, and especially when I hear about what's going on in the Ukraine. I feel like going over there, if they'd have me, quite happily. I don't know what I'd do when I got there. Sort things out, I suppose, and I don't know, but the care, that side of me has never left me, to be honest. Because I worked in a children's home for 3 years with mentally and physically handicapped kids, and then went to work for Camden. And it's hard to forget that, when you've done it for so long. And I'm always saying I'm going to get a proper job. I'm too old now. I need a care. I need a home help.
It's not too late. I've got to talk about Lily Savage.
Lily.
Yes. Take me back then to the time when you were a compere at a drag night in a South London pub, 1985, when she was created, I understand.
You see, it was when I was working for Captain, doing all these living in jobs, they never used to pay us overtime. We used to get time off in lieu instead. And that's all very well having 6 weeks off, but you need money. So I used to work part-time, and I was working in a pub in Vauxhall called the Elephant and Castle, which is long gone. It's a Starbucks now.
Wow.
And they used to have an amateur talent night on a Tuesday. And one night, like a fool, I said to the manager, I could do better than that. And he said, well, why don't you? And that was it, really. And I got up the following Tuesday, terrified, fortified by whiskey, and just did it, and it just came out. This just poured. I thought, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And out it came, and that was it. Really, it was never a career move. It was a sort of part-time job, and one thing led to another. I started doing it more, and then a friend of mine, she said to me, "You're moonlighting, aren't you?" She worked for the council. I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, this is your moonlighting job." She said, "Why don't you go for what you're doing? Do it with Lily." So I did. And I went to the Edinburgh Festival, and I did all sorts. I trailed around the pubs for years and years in clubs.
Did you? So there was a long period of time where it was, hard to make a living, or you were, still trying to kind of climb up the ladder when it came to, decent regular income.
I didn't think it went anywhere. I thought that was it. I worked in pubs and clubs up and down the country and sometimes abroad. And that sort of suited me fine. I didn't really have any ambition. I'd never thought in a million years you'd get Lily Savage on television. So I didn't aspire to that. I just got on with it. And we just, for about 8-9 years, maybe 10, maybe longer, just work clubs and pubs.
Is it true
I had no idea.
Is it true that Lily's based on your Auntie Chris?
There's a bit of my Auntie Chris in Lily, yeah.
Which bit?
Because I got a letter off a lady who was in, I can't even remember now. This is shameful what Auntie Chrissy did in the war, but she was on an AK gun. She was only young. And I got a letter off an old lady saying, "You don't half remind me of your Auntie Chris," because I worked with her. She said she sat there on the AK. She was a search and finder, that's it. She used to trace where the planes were and then tell whoever was on the gun to fire. And because she was captain of the darts team, she was known as No Chance, Never Miss Chris, because she had the eye. But, and she was a clippy on the bus, so she was very glamorous, and she was full of wisecracks and one-liners. She always had a fag hanging out of her mouth. And so, I think definitely a bit of osmosis went on there. And there was a bit of Auntie Chrissy in Lily.
Love it. And as someone who took drag mainstream really back in the 90s, what do you make of RuPaul's Drag Race now on the telly?
Well, it's moved on, hasn't it? So it's, how everything changes. And that, I suppose this is the next sort of, look at drag, I suppose, if you want to put it like that. It's gone another way now, because it wasn't really, for us, it was about, it was more based in musical and variety, I'd say, than the acts on RuPaul's Drag Act. With them, the makeup's fabulous, the wigs are fabulous, the costumes are fabulous. But can you actually stand on stage for 2 hours and keep 3,000 people entertained? Probably can. I don't know. It's people always ask me this, and I don't watch it.
Do you not?
No, not. I don't actually watch a lot of television, to tell you the truth. And this again is something to do with lockdown, because I watched far too much television during lockdown on Netflix and all this. I was getting into all these series that had about 60 episodes. And so I sort of weaned myself off television, to tell you the truth. I watch a bit. I love EastEnders. I never miss that.
Yeah. Some of the contestants on RuPaul's Drag Race have since come out as transgender. And you talk about things moving on, and it's obviously different. Dressing up in drag is different to coming out as transgender. What do you make of where we are in society in terms of being able to express your identity better, being able to publicly declare that you're trans?
Well, this is it. I'm a great believer in whatever makes you happy. You know what I mean? Whatever. If you feel you're in the wrong body, then fine, do something about it and live your life and be happy with it. And people are so past remarkable and so quick to make remarks that it annoys me. I know so many trans people, and it's no big deal. It's absolutely never has been. And of course, working on the gay scene, there were loads of trans people, trans men and women. And it's so to me, it means nothing. I don't mean it means nothing, but I'm so familiar with it. A lot of people probably aren't, but I'm not, and I never have been.
Yeah. Do you think
and fair play to them. Yeah. Live your life. That's what I say.
Do you think it's blown up in a way. It has become a really sensitive issue. But do you
Oh,
think
very,
do
yeah.
you think it's blown up because there are now more transgender people out there, and actually it's probably time for government to think about how we legislate whether you want women-only spaces or whether you want equality, the right to self-identify. We're now getting to the point where sort of society needs to catch up and find some common ground between
Well,
what's
this is
sort of
it,
become two sides, hasn't it, almost?
I know, there's a lot of fuss about toilets and changing rooms. And what I always say about trans people, they go, oh, they've just thrown a frock on. I said, no, if you're serious about it, you go through the most appalling operation. A lot of pain, electrolysis or whatever they have now to get rid of beards, all that kind of business. They're very brave. Trans people are extremely brave because once they've made that transition, they've then gone to slot into what you would call normal society. But I'm afraid society isn't very normal. It never has been and never will be. And I think it's about time we accepted people, whatever, colour, trans, whatever, and we don't. It so annoys me.
I want to talk about your Radio 2 show. And the general consensus, Paul, is that there's still a bit of confusion about the announcement last month that you'd be stepping down until May. So comedian Rob Beckett, the one with the teeth, has come in to replace you. I was just trying to explain how I describe him in case listeners were like, who is that?
That's how I described him.
Okay, fair enough. What happened?
I don't know, really. All of a sudden they said, well, we want you to do 13 weeks on and 13 weeks off. So I thought, well, that's a bit odd, and so I'm in my 13 weeks off stint at the moment, and I go back in May. And then I do these 13 weeks, and I don't know whether Rob's coming back or whether they're getting somebody else in. But it just seemed, I don't know. I'd like to be able to say I don't understand the reasoning. I don't understand why they did, and I don't understand the reasoning behind it. Because it was a huge hoo-ha. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, and your listeners are still really annoyed about it, by the way.
Flaming. I can't go anywhere without, people go, what's going on? And I say, why are you ill? No. Well, why are you taking all this time off? And I say, it's not my decision.
So they haven't explained why.
It's nothing to do with me. I do. I tell them, I say, it wasn't me. It's the management's decision. It was nothing to do with me. I didn't say I want 13 weeks off. I'm fed up because it was, I was recording it from home, which was a delight because sometimes I'd have to go in the airing cupboard, if the house was noisy. Seriously, you wouldn't believe where I've been, Kate, recording that show. I've had low-flying aircraft. I've had dogs barking. I've had to interrupt the show while I've gone and answered the door to a parcel. And I'm highly embarrassed. And of course, the listeners loved it because during lockdown, it was quite human, really.
Do you think it's ageism creeping in there? Do you think it's that constant quest sometimes that some broadcasters have chasing after the younger audience?
Oh, they're always chasing after the young audience, and they have been since the year one. But the thing is, the young audience grow up and they still stick with things they liked. I mean, I still watch The Avengers on telly. And because I love them and they're professionals and and all those programs upstairs and downstairs, I still stick with them all these years later. No, I don't think it is ageism. I did ask about that. And they said, oh, no, it's nothing to do with that because there's quite a few on Radio 2 who are older than me. You've got Johnny Walker, Ken Bruce. They're all older than me and they're still doing it.
Well, look, I'm guessing...
If it was ageism, I'd be very annoyed, believe you me.
Yeah, well, they probably wouldn't...
Because I'd say, there's life in the old dog, believe you me.
And I'm not sure that they would admit it to you anyway, because I'm sure there's probably
some
sort of legal issue there.
That's right.
I suppose the upside of these 13 weeks off is that you can write more books if you need to, or start new projects.
I've just started I'm just finishing, I should say, the second book, which was a bit like homework to start off with.
I get that. Yeah. Like, do I have to?
Do I have to, I'd say. And I'd clean the house. I'd clean the windows. I'd do, you name it. I'd do anything that I wouldn't normally do just to avoid sitting down in front of a laptop and starting it again. But once I got going, I really enjoyed it. And a writer, what I call a proper writer, said to me one day, you'll find it very strange, but the characters will take you where they want to take you. And it's so true. because what I intended to write, I didn't. You know, I'd say, oh, right, okay. Oh, we're going there, are we? A strange process,
But
but enjoyable.
yeah.
Well,
So
it's enjoyable. I'll be honest with you. It's enjoyable when you've finished it and you've edited it and you send it off. Thank God for that.
well, that I'm sure will be hitting our bookshelves at some point, maybe later in the year. It's been lovely to speak to you, and it's been
And you
lovely,
as well.
lovely to make my way through your book. I've been trying all week to convince my 7-year-old to start reading it so we could record a review for you. But he doesn't like to be gaslighted by me and forced to have a microphone underneath his chin. So maybe next time. Paul,
Do you know what I found out about the book? Can I just say?
Yeah, go on.
And I didn't realise this. Eddie has gotten, his mother's died, and the baby orangutan was snatched from his mother. Now that struck a chord with a lot of children, especially foster children and children who didn't have a mother. That really struck a chord. And I only found this out by the letters they were sending me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they were going on about mainly. The villainess, they weren't bothered about it at
No.
all. She's just a comic, really.
The Instagram lover. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, look,
yeah, she's just...
it is a wonderful book, and we look forward to seeing more in the series. Eddie Albert and the Amazing Animal Gang is now out in paperback. Broadcaster, author, TV legend Paul O'Grady. Thanks for joining us on Times Radio. Thank you.
And thank you very much for having me, Kate. It's been lovely. I've enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Thank you.